He threw $200,000 onto the silver tray. His voice was low, cold, echoing across the elegant restaurant in Manhattan. If you serve me in Chinese, this money is yours. The crowd froze. No one believed a black woman in a worn apron could even understand the challenge. They laughed, whispered, raised their phones. An expensive game between power and pride. But that woman didn't step back. She looked straight at the billionaire before her, eyes calm, steady. "All right," she said softly, "but if I succeed, you'll learn something worth more than money." No one knew. That waitress once held a PhD in linguistics from Stanford. And that bet would shake three of Asia's biggest business empires. The sound of knives and forks striking plates echoed like the ticking of a wealthy, frozen world. Golden steer shimmered beneath golden lights, mirrors reflecting rows of guests in evening gowns and tailored suits. At the center table sat Nathan Pierce, his platinum watch glinting like a quiet reminder of power. He leaned toward the three investors from Tokyo. Takeshi Mori, calm. Ken Arai, cautious. Yuto Tanabe, young, curious. Their voices were low and precise, each word a test. When the final glass of wine was poured, Nathan smiled faintly. He watched the approaching waitress, a black woman in a black uniform, hair tied neatly, footsteps light as if afraid to disturb the pride in the air. Her name was Olivia Carter. Nathan tapped his fingers on the table, his voice hoarse but steady. "I hear this place only hires people who speak multiple languages." Olivia set down the tray and bowed slightly. "We try to serve our international guests as best we can, sir." Nathan smirked. "As best you can? That sounds modest. I'd like to see your limit." He pulled a thick stack of bills from his vest pocket, spreading it on the silver tray like cards. The first note was 100. The rest followed, thick and gleaming. The air in the room changed color. Takeshi raised an eyebrow. Ken sipped his wine. Yuto frowned slightly. "Here's $200,000, Nathan said, each word deliberate. "If you serve me entirely in Chinese for the rest of this dinner, you can take it home. If not, you'll kneel and apologize before everyone here." A murmur rippled through the nearby tables. A woman in a red dress whispered, "That's cruel." A man laughed quietly. She might know a few phrases. But Chinese? For 200 grand? Olivia looked at the money, then at him. Her eyes didn't tremble. They only reflected the flicker of gold light on the table, the glow of resolve. "Sir," she said slowly, "are you sure you want to play this game?" "This game?" Nathan's lips curved. "No, this is a lesson." Silence stretched between them. Then Olivia nodded. "All right, I'll accept." That simple line thickened the air. Takeshi leaned back, watching Nathan. "Mr. Pierce," he said softly, "are you buying pride or testing intellect?" Nathan's smile barely moved. "Both." Olivia lifted the tray, her voice calm but clear. "Then we'll begin whenever you're ready." She turned away. The hem of her uniform swayed gently, and in that moment, no one realized they were witnessing the beginning of something that would echo far beyond this room. Nathan squinted after her, speaking to Ken in a half-mocking tone. "People need to be reminded of their place, especially when they think they're smart." Ken didn't answer. He only glanced at Takeshi. Takeshi sighed softly, speaking in Japanese. Cruelty is often a mask for fear. But Nathan didn't hear. He was staring at the empty silver tray on the table, the last bill trembling faintly. A sound so small, it could only be felt, not heard. The sound of something much greater is beginning. Olivia stepped into the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear. An old chef looked up. Worried. "What did he do to you?" She answered quietly. "It's fine, uncle. Just a challenge." "You speak Chinese?" She smiled faintly. "More than that." In the steam and clatter of pans, Olivia closed her eyes. Old memories returned. Stanford lecture halls, the papers she once wrote, her Chinese professor's voice echoing. Tone is respect. She opened her eyes, gazing into the fogged mirror before her. The woman staring back was calm, her eyes deep and bright. She whispered in Mandarin, "Respect isn't something people give you, it's something you hold on to." Outside, Nathan raised his glass, turning to the three investors. "You know, in New York, everyone's playing a role. I just want to see which one she fits." Yuto replied in clear English. "Sometimes people stay silent because they already know words won't matter." A faint smile touched Takeshi's lips. Ken checked his watch, trying to hide his discomfort. None of them knew. Every word spoken at that table was becoming a piece of a story the world would soon discuss. Olivia returned. She placed the empty tray before Nathan, her expression calm, as if this was just another night at work. "Are you ready for your test, sir?" she asked. The table fell silent. Nathan narrowed his eyes. "I thought you were the one being tested." Olivia tilted her head slightly, her voice gentle as wind. "No, you're mistaken. The test is for both of us." Nathan laughed, a sharp sound slicing through the tension. "I like boldness. Fine, let's begin. I want to see how long you can handle pressure." She replied, "The longer it lasts, the clearer it becomes who truly loses control." A waiter passing by froze for a moment. He knew Olivia. He'd seen her studying during breaks, memorizing Chinese characters taped to the coffee machine. Now he stood still, unable to interfere, as every gaze in the room focused on one woman. Olivia straightened her uniform and whispered, "I accept the challenge." Nathan lifted his glass, his tone cold. "The world belongs to those who dare to gamble." She met his eyes and smiled. "And sometimes, it belongs to those who dare to endure." In that moment, the room stopped breathing. No one realized, outside, Manhattan still glowed, and among its countless lights, a single flame had been lit in the heart of a woman once dismissed. One day, that flame would shake 3 empires. A soft breeze drifted through the small window at the end of the hallway. Olivia's apartment barely fit a bed, a desk, and a bookshelf crowded with old textbooks. Sticky notes covered the walls, each filled with handwritten Chinese characters. On the desk lay a letter from Stanford, yellowed and curled at the edges with time. Years ago, she had stood in a bright lecture hall, her voice clear and confident. On the board was a map of Chinese phonetics. Below it, hundreds of students were writing diligently. Back then, they called her Dr. Carter, the youngest linguistics scholar in the department. She had interpreted at United Nations forums, held conversations with ambassadors in 9 languages. Then, one midnight call shattered everything. A trembling nurse's voice through the phone. "Your mother," stopped breathing for a few seconds. "We're trying." The world collapsed in a single breath. From that day, she left the lecture halls, left her research, and faced an endless line of medical bills. The hospital sent debt notices, the insurance company refused to pay. Each signature on a paper cost her something: her apartment, her car, her academic honor. In the end, only 2 choices remained: declare bankruptcy or leave California and start again. She chose to leave. New York greeted her with a season of rain. The Harlem building where she rented a room was damp, wooden stairs groaning under every step. But inside that narrow space, she still studied, still read, still wrote. Beside her mother's hospital bed, she translated passages of ancient Chinese linguistics, pausing every time the woman coughed. In the mornings, she worked at the care unit, feeding and cleaning patients. At night, she went to Golden Steer, tied her apron, and carried a silver tray through crowds of people she once lectured to at conferences. No one knew Dr. Olivia Carter was serving them. No one asked, because no one cared. Sometimes, when Japanese guests spoke, she heard the language she once taught. A strange ache rose inside her, the feeling of someone who still had knowledge, but had to stay silent to survive. Each night, when she came home, she wrote in her journal, "Every workday is a lesson in humility, but after so much silence, even language begins to ache inside me." One evening, after her shift, she stood by the window, watching the river of cars below the neon lights. Her hand touched an old folder, pages of Chinese notes written in pencil. She whispered in Mandarin, "There's still a place for me in this world. It just isn't my turn yet." A few weeks later, Golden Steer had a new regular, Nathan Pierce. He came every Tuesday night, always at table 7, always ordering the most expensive wine, always carrying the same air of disdain. When Olivia approached to pour his drink, he looked at her and said to his friend, "This girl looks like she can read. Maybe she went to college." Another man laughed. "In Harlem? If she could read, she wouldn't be here." The laughter was cold, sharp enough to touch her heart. Olivia didn't respond. She only asked, softly, "What would you like for dinner, sir?" Nathan glanced at the menu. "Ask me in English only. Don't try to sound clever." She nodded. "Yes, sir." That reply satisfied him, but made Ken, the investor nearby, turn to observe. Takeshi watched her for a few seconds longer. He said nothing, only gave a faint nod, like a man who'd seen spirits tested but unbroken. As Olivia walked away, he whispered in Japanese, his voice low enough for only Yuto to hear. "The quietest person in the room often holds the sharpest blade." Yuto looked at him, then at Olivia, retreating toward the kitchen, as if engraving the words into memory. That night, after closing, Olivia sat in the kitchen corner, scrolling through her phone, studying every dish name on the Chinese menu. She refused to be humiliated again. Outside, the world had no idea that this quiet preparation would change everything. Across Manhattan, Nathan Pierce was telling a friend at a private party, "That waitress thinks she's smart. I'll teach her a lesson. 200 grand, if she dares to take it." Laughter filled the luxury hall. No one realized he was setting a trap for himself. Olivia went home, laid down her apron, and poured herself a glass of water. She opened her old laptop and reread her research in Chinese. On the screen, the title glowed faintly, "The Rhythm of Respect in Mandarin Tonality." She read a line to herself. Language is not just sound, it is respect between the speaker and the listener. A soft smile crossed her face. Because she knew, soon, the world would hear the voice it once tried to silence. The air inside Golden Steer that night was thick, like a storm waiting to break. Crystal glasses caught the pale golden light, and the wealthy guests sat silent, waiting for Nathan Pierce's show to begin. He leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked, voice steady like someone reading a verdict. "To save time, let's set the rules right now." Every eye turned toward him. "Waitress, if you speak fluent Chinese through this entire dinner, you'll take $200,000 home from this table. If you fail, you'll kneel and apologize to everyone here for wasting their time." A low murmur spread through the room. Yuto frowned. Takeshi shook his head slightly. Ken crossed his arms in silence. Nathan turned to them, smiling like a blade wrapped in silk. "Don't take it too seriously. It's just how successful people have fun." Olivia stood one step away, the silver tray in her hand reflecting her calm face. No one expected her to smile. "Mr. Pierce," she said slowly, 200,000 is too little." Laughter rippled from a few tables. "Too little?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Yes," she replied, "because you're not only testing my language, you're trying to humiliate a person. That price feels cheap for something like that." Ken let out a quiet laugh. Yuto's eyes softened with surprise and respect. Nathan laughed louder, hiding a flicker of unease. "How much do you want?" Her voice didn't change. "Double it. 400,000 if I succeed, and if I fail, I'll kneel just as you said." The sound of those words froze the room. A moment later, Nathan nodded, his smile uneven. "Deal. Don't say I never gave you a chance." Takeshi frowned. "Mr. Pierce, sometimes power makes people forget that another person's dignity isn't something you bargain for." Nathan replied dryly, "In business, everything has a price." "Not everything," Takeshi said quietly, and the table fell still. Olivia gently placed the tray on the table, her eyes calm. "I'll speak in the language of respect. You've chosen the language of power." Nathan tilted his head, smirking. "You think you can teach me morality?" "No," she said softly. I just mean that arrogance speaks so loudly, it forgets how to listen. Uneasy laughter flickered across the room. Some tried to appear relaxed, but everyone felt something shifting. Ken leaned toward Yuto, whispering, "He's walking straight into a storm." Yuto quietly unlocked his phone and started recording. Not to expose anyone, but because he sensed this night wouldn't be ordinary. Olivia stood still, her hands clasped behind her back to hide the quick rhythm of her heartbeat. She knew one tremor would make them think she was afraid. She inhaled deeply, letting her breath merge with the sound of glasses and the ticking clock. Nathan leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Do you know why I chose you?" "Because I'm the easiest person in the room to look down on," Olivia said without hesitation. He laughed loudly. "Exactly, and that's why you'll lose." She tilted her head. "You're mistaken. That's why I have to win." The answer made Takeshi set his glass down. Ken looked at Nathan, noticing the tightness in his face. The kind of tension seen in a man used to control, now realizing it's slipping away. Nathan turned back to the investors, forcing calm into his tone. "Gentlemen, think of this as an example of the line between confidence and delusion. She'll show you what happens when people step beyond their limits." Yuto spoke softly. "Or perhaps you're the one crossing yours." Nathan ignored him, waving a hand. "Bring her the Chinese menu. Let's have some entertainment." Olivia stepped back, her gaze catching the mirror behind Nathan. In that reflection, she saw herself, the woman who once stood at a lectern, now preparing for a harsher, but truer, examination. Her fingers tightened around the silver tray, not for balance, but as a reminder to herself, "Don't tremble, respect has rhythm, and you still remember it." Takeshi watched her and said slowly in English, "In Japan, we say, those who craft cruel jokes are often laughed at last." Nathan smiled faintly. "Thank you, but I prefer to laugh first." Yuto looked at him quietly. "Sometimes, those who laugh first never understand why others laugh later." The table went silent. The air thickened until only their breathing remained. Olivia bowed slightly, her voice soft as wind. "I'll prepare." She turned and walked past the tables, leaving behind arrogance and hollow laughter. Takeshi watched her go, murmuring, "A storm begins with a single breath." Ken answered, "And it won't end here." Up front, Nathan reclined again, lips curled, thinking he still controlled the game. But in the eyes of the three investors, the light had shifted. They no longer saw him as the master of the evening, but as a man testing the limits of his own pride. That night, Golden Steer was unnaturally quiet. The crystal lights above shimmered, reflecting faces waiting for something unseen. And through that heavy silence, Olivia disappeared from their sight, carrying a whispered promise only she could hear. "When language becomes the weapon of dignity, no one can silence us again." Golden Steer fell silent. Only the ticking clock behind the bar remained. The tables around seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next act in Nathan Pierce's play. He leaned back, a cold smile on his lips. In front of him lay a thick menu filled with dozens of dishes written in Chinese. He tapped his fingers lightly on the leather cover, keeping rhythm with his own arrogance. Olivia Carter stood a few steps away, silver tray in hand, eyes lowered to the tangled lines of text. More than 40 dishes, complex characters long and winding like a maze. She took a slow breath, letting the noise fade until the world turned still. In her mind, the colors changed. She remembered the small room in Beijing where she had spent hours practicing tones. Her teacher's stern voice still echoed inside her. Tone is respect. Every rise and fall, every pause, was an act of reverence. She had understood it not only through intellect, but through the struggle of a foreigner desperate to be heard. A soft laugh from the next table pulled her back. A woman whispered to her friend, "She probably can't read a single line." Olivia didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, steady, like someone preparing for the greatest performance of her life. In the kitchen behind her, the old chef glanced through the doorway and saw her standing still as stone. He whispered to the sous chef, "That girl." Looks like she's about to pray. But she wasn't praying, she was finding rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4 tones of Mandarin. Somehow the years of study returned, each syllable linking to the next, precise enough for her to hear the soft tapping of memory. She opened her eyes. Nathan was smirking before her, and behind him sat 3 silent investors. Takeshi folded his arms, his gaze deep as if reading another man's thoughts. Ken could not hide his concern. Yuto quietly kept recording. Olivia knew that one small mistake would be enough for the crowd to gloat. But she was no longer afraid. Her greatest fear had already happened, the day she left the lecture hall. Everything after that had been a test to see if she could still hold on to her dignity. She remembered the hospital room where her mother lay motionless. The pile of bills on the table, thick as a paper wall. Each night, when her mother's breathing weakened, she read aloud from her Chinese texts, just to keep herself from falling apart. Now, those syllables returned, clearer than ever. Each character is no longer a grammar lesson, but a memory of sleepless nights, of tears, of quiet endurance. She whispered softly in Chinese, "Respect is the first sound of humanity." Only she heard it. But Yuto caught that moment with his camera, and he understood that the woman before him was no longer a waitress. She was becoming her own strength. Nathan waved to the manager. "Bring the special menu." A black leather binder was placed on the table, heavy and glossy like a challenge. "From Shanghai," Nathan said. "Every dish includes a technical description. If you're a real linguist, this shouldn't be difficult." Olivia stepped forward, her hand resting lightly on the cover. Cold, smooth, heavy, like the years of debt she had carried. She opened it. Lines of text ran in every direction, yet they no longer looked chaotic. Instead, they felt strangely familiar. A dish she had once researched. A sentence she had analyzed in her Beijing lectures. A memory surfaced. She was in front of her students, explaining the word mala, spicy and numbing. She had smiled and said, "This feeling is like life itself. Sometimes it numbs you, but it still burns to the heart." Now, in the lavish restaurant, that memory returned as a quiet reminder. She closed the menu gently and looked up. "If Mr. Pierce is ready, we may begin." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "I hope you're not planning to back down." She smiled. "Not at all, sir. I just want to begin in rhythm." Takeshi leaned toward Ken and whispered, "She's controlling the air around them. Nathan should notice." Ken nodded, his eyes never leaving Olivia. She took one last deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the golden-lit room. No one spoke. A few guests forced smiles, others held their breath. The air felt stretched to its limit. Only the steady beating of her heart filled the silence. Nathan lifted his wine glass and turned it slowly. "Are you sure you understand what you're about to read?" Olivia replied softly, "I don't need to understand it with my mind, sir. I already understand it with my life." She set the tray down, her hands loose and calm. No trembling, no fear. Only that strange certainty, as if she had been rehearsing for this moment for 3 long years, one day at a time. She looked straight at him, eyes steady, no anger, only conviction. "If you don't mind, sir," she said slowly, "let's begin." Nathan smirked and gestured. "Then impress me, clever girl." Olivia tilted her head slightly, the light above casting half her face in glow and half in shadow. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her lips. "No, Mr. Pierce, I don't intend to impress you. Ed." She paused, her voice deepened. "I intend to make you remember." The entire room went still. No one fully understood her words, yet everyone felt it, the beginning of something that could never be undone. The air inside Golden Steer grew dense, like a thin layer of mist clinging to wine glasses. Everyone held their breath. On the table, the black leather menu lay open, golden light reflecting off the ancient Chinese characters. Nathan Pierce leaned back, a smirk curling on his lips. "Let's see what you can do." Olivia Carter stood tall, both hands resting lightly on the edge of the silver tray. No trembling. No voices in her head. Only the stillness of someone who knows that when you have nothing left to lose, every word you speak carries the weight of your entire life. She looked straight at him. "Good evening, gentlemen." The opening line slipped out like a breath. Then came the flow, flawless Chinese tones filling the air. "Tonight, allow me to introduce the restaurant's special menu." Her voice was low, resonant, precise in every tone. The three Japanese investors immediately lifted their heads. Yuto Tanabe tilted slightly, his eyes brightening as if he'd heard something sacred. He whispered in English, her tones perfect. Nathan frowned. "What was that? What did she say?" No one answered, because the moment he spoke, Olivia continued. "Our first course, mapo tofu from the Sichuan region." Her tone moved slowly, melodic. "Each piece of soft tofu is cooked with fermented Pekian chili paste aged for 2 years, blended with numbing Sichuan peppercorns, creating the flavor mala, both spicy and tingling, a symbol of balance in Chinese cuisine." Ken Arai turned toward Takeshi and murmured, "She's lecturing." Takeshi didn't look away. "No, she's teaching us dignity." Nathan narrowed his eyes, tapping the table with his finger. "She's probably memorized a few lines." But before he finished, Olivia shifted her tone. "The second dish, Peking duck, marinated for 24 hours in honey and soy, roasted in a fruitwood oven until the skin turns crisp as glass. Each slice carries 6 centuries of history, born from the Ming dynasty." The restaurant fell silent. Olivia wasn't reading, she was storytelling. Her voice guided the room through centuries, letting everyone touch culture without leaving their seats. A guest at a nearby table whispered, "Who is she?" No one knew for sure, but everyone felt it. This was no longer entertainment. Olivia paused for half a breath, glancing at Nathan. He scoffed. "Impressive, but anyone can memorize a speech." She answered gently, "Would you prefer I continue in another dialect? Beijing, Cantonese, or Taiwanese?" His smile froze. She changed her tone, gliding into Cantonese like flowing water. The sound deepened, richer, heavier, carrying the weight of an old tale. "In Hong Kong, this dish is served in traditional Qing tea houses, where each slice is wrapped in quiet reverence for tradition." Yuto stood up, eyes wide. "Cantonese, perfect." A few people clapped by instinct. Nathan's face flushed, his hand tightening around the wine glass. "You're fooling them with theatrics." Olivia's voice remained calm. "Language isn't performance, Mr. Pierce. It's how humans understand one another." She switched to Taiwanese, then back to standard Mandarin. Each tone flowed like silk ribbons, weaving through the air. As she spoke, the restaurant forgot where they were. Only the sound of respect remained. "Mr. Pierce," she continued in Chinese, "do you know the character Jing, respect, is formed from 2 parts? One means person, the other means speech. Without words, a person cannot show reverence." Takeshi spoke softly to Ken. "This is no longer a test, it's a lesson." Ken nodded, his lips pressed tight. Yuto kept recording, his hands trembling slightly with emotion. Olivia closed the menu, her eyes never leaving Nathan. "I can stop here, if you wish." Nathan laughed, a hollow sound echoing through the heavy air. "You think you've won?" She tilted her head. "No, sir. I just think you've learned something." Takeshi rose, his voice calm yet firm. "She doesn't need to win. She just proved that when people truly understand each other, power loses its meaning." Ken added quietly, "She's speaking the language of human worth." Nathan slammed his glass onto the table. "Enough." But the shattering crystal couldn't drown out the applause rising from across the room. One table after another, guests stood, silent but certain. Olivia bowed her head slightly. Not smiling, just a small, respectful nod. Under the golden lights, her face glowed, still and clear as lake water. She turned to the 3 investors. "Thank you for listening, because sometimes listening itself is an act of courage." Nathan pushed his chair back, his face strained. "You think this ends here?" She looked at him, her tone soft but sharp as steel. "No, Mr. Pierce, This is only the beginning. A wave of silence spread. Someone whispered, "She's rewriting the room." And she had. In that elegant restaurant, the hierarchy of power had quietly changed places. Olivia stepped back, leaving space between her and Nathan. Her hand rested once more on the silver tray, its reflection glimmering like the heartbeat of conviction. "From now on, sir, you may order whatever you like, but please remember, the finest dish in the world is still respect." No one exhaled. No one spoke. Her words lingered, echoing through every corner of Golden Steer. A long moment passed. Then came the applause again, stronger, real. No longer polite, but honest recognition. She bowed slightly and stepped back. Takeshi watched her go. Yuto kept filming. Ken pressed a hand to his chest, holding back emotion. Nathan sat in silence, his eyes blank, his face drained of color. Olivia turned away, walking quietly down the corridor, leaving behind a silence filled with witness. As the door closed softly behind her, one line returned in her mind, a whisper from long ago. All knowledge is humanity's prayer for dignity. And that night, inside the Golden Steer, that prayer was finally spoken aloud. The room felt as if a storm had passed, and no one had noticed until it was over. The applause faded slowly. No music, no wine, only the heavy breath of a crowd that had just witnessed something beyond understanding. Olivia Carter still stood there, calm beneath the golden light. Her composure made Nathan Pierce feel as if the air itself had thinned. For a moment, he was no longer a billionaire, just a man facing the truth. "Mr. Pierce," she said softly, her voice not loud but resonant, "I believe you now understand that sometimes the most valuable thing in a restaurant isn't on the menu." Nathan narrowed his eyes, struggling to reclaim his authority. "You think a few clever words make you better than me?" She looked at him, her gaze free of hatred, only filled with a quiet that made others afraid to meet it. "No, sir, I'm not better than anyone. I've just stopped being silent. Haven't lately suspected—" He let out a dry, broken laugh, but it stopped midway. "Who are you, really?" The question hung in the air like a lost blade. Olivia answered slowly, every word clear, not a syllable out of rhythm. "I am Dr. Olivia Carter, Ph.D. in linguistics from Stanford, former United Nations interpreter, researcher and lecturer in Beijing for applied linguistics, fluent in 9 languages." The room went utterly still. No one moved. No one blinked. Yuto Tanabe lowered his phone, his lips parted without sound. Takeshi Mori looked at Nathan, his face stripped of the patience he once carried. Ken Arai whispered, "My God, she's real." Nathan forced a smile. "Impossible. A Stanford Ph.D. wouldn't work as a waitress. You're lying." Olivia's expression didn't change. "Why not, sir? Do scholars not eat? Do teachers not go bankrupt? Can a daughter with a sick mother not wash glasses to pay off debt?" Her words were gentle as air, but each one fell like stone. Nathan dropped his gaze, then lifted it again, clinging to the remnants of power. "Do you even realize what you've done? You just humiliated a man who could destroy you." Olivia smiled, a calm, quiet smile that made the entire room shiver. "Mr. Pierce, power cannot destroy dignity. It only exposes who truly lacks it." Takeshi rose to his feet, one hand resting on the table. "Mr. Pierce, enough. I once believed investing with you was investing in vision. Now I see it was investing in arrogance." Ken followed. "We're withdrawing from the $200 million deal. Tonight." Nathan's face drained of color. He stumbled half a step back. "You can't do that. This is just a misunderstanding." Yuto's voice was steady, deep as iron. "No, this is the truth, and truth doesn't need translation." Whispers spread through the crowd. Every gaze turned toward Nathan like mirrors, showing him to himself. Olivia remained still, not victorious, not defeated, simply present. She walked slowly to the table, her eyes on the untouched stack of cash. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "you challenged me with 200,000 to prove my worth. Now that worth no longer sits on this tray." She pushed the silver tray toward him. Money loses value fast, but respect doesn't. Nathan didn't touch it. His hand trembled. All his life, he had commanded others, but now every command inside him turned to ash. Takeshi leaned forward, his voice low but firm. The richest man in the room isn't the one with the most money. It's the one who no longer needs to prove how much he has. Ken looked at Olivia. Thank you for reminding us that people still matter more than numbers. Yuto turned to Nathan. And thank you for writing your own indictment. Nathan sank back into his chair, as if his legs could no longer bear him. The light reflected across his face, revealing deep lines carved by a lifetime of believing himself untouchable. Olivia didn't leave yet. She looked around the room once more, every face, every furrowed brow, every pair of eyes, now different. No one laughed. No one treated it as a show anymore. Everyone stood in silence, listening to the echo of their own conscience. Mr. Pierce, she said, I don't need your apology. I only need you to see. See what? He asked. That contempt is also a language, and tonight I simply translated it for you. She stepped back, the light falling across half her face, one side bright, one side shadowed. It was the image of two worlds, power and dignity, finally seeing each other with nothing left between them. Yuto kept recording, no longer for publicity, but to preserve a moment that people would one day recall as the night a billionaire bowed to a waitress. The room was silent. Then came footsteps, slow, steady, as Olivia turned and walked toward the hall. Each step measured like the ticking of justice itself. When the door of Golden Steer closed behind her, Nathan lifted his eyes. The silver tray caught the light and blinded him for a second. For the first time in his life, he realized money could make a man blind. Outside, Olivia paused beneath the awning, her breath turning to mist in the cool night air. A soft breeze passed, carrying a quiet thought through her heart. One language may not save the world, but it can save a person's dignity. And that night, that dignity was spoken aloud, through everything she had ever learned, lost, and kept. The next morning, Golden Steer opened as usual. But today, no one talked about the menu or the wine. People came to see something they had never seen in this room before. Nathan Pierce sat at his usual table. In front of him, the silver tray and the stack of $200,000. The ceiling light poured down on him, harsh and blinding, like a silent judgment. The crowd gathered around. Those who had stayed silent the night before were all here now. The 3 Japanese investors had returned as well. Takeshi stared straight ahead. Ken gave a slow nod. Yuto held his phone ready. Olivia Carter walked in, her steps calm and measured. Her black uniform looked smoother today. Her eyes carried no anger, only a steady stillness that seemed to quiet the whole room. Nathan didn't look up. He knew what was coming. For the first time in his life, he had to do something he once considered humiliating. But today, it was the only thing that could save the last piece of his dignity. Olivia stopped by the table. Mr. Pierce, I believe you know why everyone is here. Her voice was soft, but clear, like metal brushing stone. He nodded, his hands trembling. I know. Then he opened his wallet and began laying the bills one by one on the table. 1, 2, 3. The crisp sound of paper echoed through the room, steady and cold. No one spoke. Only that sound filled the air, like the countdown of a crumbling empire. When the last bill was placed down, Nathan looked up. His face had gone pale, his eyes red. I'm sorry. Olivia didn't answer. She simply watched him, as if to see whether he understood the meaning behind his own words. He repeated, voice cracking. I'm sorry. Silence followed. Then she spoke. Apologies mean nothing if people don't change. Nathan bowed his head. I'll change. No, Mr. Pierce, she said slowly. Change isn't a promise. It's what you do when no one is watching. Yuto lifted his phone, recording. Not to humiliate, but to capture proof that dignity still existed. Takeshi spoke quietly, his tone like a verdict. A man can buy an entire city, but he cannot buy this moment. Ken looked around the room. This is no longer about money. This is about how we treat one another. A young waitress stood in the corner, wiping her tears. She had once been yelled at by Nathan for spilling a glass of wine. Now, she saw him bow his head to a woman who once carried the same tray she did. Olivia began walking slowly around the table. Each step seemed to cut through the heavy air. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "you once asked why I refused to stay silent. Now I'll answer. Because if people like me don't speak, people like you will never stop." Nathan swallowed hard. "I truly regret everything." She stopped in front of him, her tone calm, never raised. "Regret is good, but remember, Mr. Pierce, reputation can be rebuilt, character cannot." He lowered his head again, like a man acknowledging the sentence he'd written for himself. Yuto uploaded the video the moment she left the restaurant. Within hours, millions of views. The title was simple: Billionaire's Public Apology, the Woman Who Spoke 9 Languages. Across screens in New York, the story spread. News anchors replayed the moment Nathan bowed his head. Some viewers cheered, others sat silent. But everyone agreed on one thing: money can never buy respect. Golden Steer became a symbol, not of luxury, but of a lesson. No longer just a restaurant. It became a story, whispered around the city. The night Justice wore an apron and spoke in many languages. When night fell, Olivia left the restaurant. A light rain swept across Manhattan, the streetlights shimmering on the wet pavement. She carried no money. It all remained on the silver tray, part of a past she had already released. She looked up at the bright sign above her. Golden Steer. Once the arena of arrogance, now only a witness to a simple truth. That is when respect is lost. The whole world must bow its head. A passerby recognized her and stopped. "You're the woman from the video, aren't you?" She smiled gently. "Maybe, but don't remember me. Remember what I said." "What line?" he asked. She answered softly. "Money loses value, but dignity doesn't." Then she turned, walking into the rain, carrying nothing but the calm gaze of someone who had won the only battle worth winning, the one against herself. Behind her, the restaurant lights blurred through the falling rain. Inside Nathan's mind, the sound of counting money still echoed, each note like a mark carved in stone. He finally understood it wasn't the sound of loss. It was the sound of awakening. And the city, beneath the rain, listened in silence. Half a year passed. New York was still loud, as if it had never witnessed anything at all. But on the 47th floor of a new glass tower in Midtown, there was a room facing the autumn sky. Her name was etched on a shining brass plaque: Olivia Carter, Director of Intercultural Relations. A long title, but to her, it simply meant one thing: that the world could still learn how to talk to itself again. She sat behind her desk, turning through files written in several languages. On the corner of the desk stood a small photo frame, her mother smiling, holding a ring of old keys. The same keys that once opened a tiny Harlem apartment, the place where she started from nothing. The phone rang. Her mother's voice came through, frail but warm. "Are you doing all right, Liv?" "I'm fine, Mom. We made it." "They're still talking about you, you know." "I know, but I only want them to remember that respect is the one language we all share." A soft laugh. "You always sound like a professor." "That's because you raised me like one." Olivia ended the call and sat quietly for a while. Outside the glass wall, the sky turned amber. Buildings reflected light into one another, as if the city itself was bowing. Her story had gone far beyond that old restaurant. The press called her the woman who spoke 9 languages and one truth. But she knew. The 10th language they never mentioned was courage. On her computer screen, an email notification blinked: Tanabe Arai International. Takeshi had sent an invitation to the 6-month relaunch ceremony. Ken added one simple line: "Thanks to you, we now measure respect as a KPI." She smiled. Sometimes, change begins with one night, one silver tray, and one steady voice. Cut to the other side of the city. A small shop in Queens opened slowly. A man in a worn shirt, hair gray at the temples, was dusting an old sign. His name was still Nathan Pierce, but no one called him a billionaire anymore. On a small TV in the corner, a documentary replayed that famous night, the moment he bowed at Golden Steer. The anchor's voice said, "That incident reshaped corporate thinking about culture and human dignity." Nathan paused, looked up at the screen. There was Olivia, speaking at an international conference. She said, "I don't want revenge for the humiliation I faced. I just want to see a world where no one has to face it again." His eyes froze. The arrogance was gone. Only fatigue remained, and the faint trace of real remorse. He turned off the TV, sat down, and opened an old notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "Respect is a language I must learn again." Back in Midtown, Olivia was still speaking. Behind her stood hundreds of delegates from across the world. They hadn't come for theory. They came for the truth. She spoke of servers who were dismissed, of quiet workers who carried entire teams, of people who taught her that justice doesn't begin in a courtroom, but in the way we say someone's name. "We live in a world ruled by numbers," she said, "but kindness has no metric. So maybe we should start with what can't be counted." Applause rose like waves. Olivia only bowed her head. She had never sought applause. She only wanted the invisible sighs of the overlooked to finally be heard. After the ceremony, a reporter approached. "Miss Carter, do you have anything you'd like to say to Mr. Pierce?" She paused, then answered slowly. "I wish him well, and I hope he understands. The rarest thing a person can lose is the chance to make things right." The reporter fell silent. There was nothing left to ask. On the way home, her car stopped at a busy intersection. A young woman was helping an old man cross the street. Olivia smiled softly. Sometimes, justice doesn't need banners. It only needs one small hand in the rush of traffic. Later that night, she returned to her apartment. On the wall hung a glass case. Inside it, the old silver tray. Under the lamp, it gleamed as if newly polished. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." Outside, the city still glittered. The towers still rose. The wealthy were still wealthy. But somewhere, in one of those countless offices, someone was reading her story and thinking about how they treat the people around them. Because sometimes, a single act is enough to change the language of an entire culture. In the quiet night, her phone buzzed. A message from Yuto. A photo, the same silver tray, now displayed in the Tokyo Museum of Corporate Culture, beneath a plaque that read, "Respect is not a currency, it's a legacy." She stared at it for a long time, then set the phone down. A voice echoed gently in her mind. "You don't need to speak 9 languages to make the world listen, just one, the truth." She smiled. The light caught in her eyes like drops of rain on glass. And in that moment, Olivia Carter knew she had nothing left to prove. The world understood. A late morning sun spilled gold over the path leading into Stanford. Yellow leaves covered the stone walkway, and on the old arch, the words still stood, the place where knowledge once saved the world from ignorance, and sometimes from its own arrogance. Olivia Carter walked through the gate. No longer a student, no longer a waitress. Today, she returned as a speaker. Inside the auditorium, hundreds of students sat in absolute silence. Some recognized her from that video. Others only knew her as the woman who made Manhattan bow its head. She stood at the center of the stage, hands loosely clasped before her. Her voice was low, steady, warm, not loud, but enough to quiet every breath in the room. "The day I left this place, I believed knowledge would protect me from everything cruel. But life taught me something else. Knowledge is only the key, character is the door." Dozens of eyes lifted toward her. She paused, letting each word land. "I once stood before a powerful man, someone who believed money could make others smaller. And in that moment, I learned. Silence can become a sin when it protects contempt." A young man raised his hand. "Miss Carter, If you could go back to that night, would you do anything differently? Olivia smiled, a quiet, steady smile. No, because sometimes you have to stand at your lowest to see the true height of dignity. The hall remained still. A soft wind drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of old wood and the memories of generations who once dreamed of changing the world. My dear students, she continued, you'll leave this place with degrees, opportunities, maybe even power. But never forget the one lesson a school can't teach: how to make another person feel respected. A young woman in the front row blinked back tears. Miss Carter, people say you forgave him. Is that true? Olivia nodded gently. Forgiveness isn't because he deserved it. It's because I deserved peace. Holding on to hatred only makes you carry someone else's shadow. Pens scratched softly across paper, but what truly stayed was the look in their eyes, the moment they understood that knowledge might earn you a title, but only kindness lets you keep it. She spoke briefly of the hard years, the small Harlem apartment, the first night serving at Golden Steer, the mother who believed her daughter would return here one day, not to study, but to teach. Her smile turned half wistful, half warm. My mother used to say, you can't teach someone to be kind. You can only show them how you live. Applause filled the room, soft, long, and reverent, the kind that means respect, not excitement. After the lecture, the dean approached her. Olivia, we'd like to invite you as an honorary lecturer, not just to teach language, but to teach about human dignity. She looked up, emotion glimmering in her eyes, yet her voice remained calm. Thank you, Dean, but what I want to teach isn't in the syllabus. I just want to tell my story, so someone else might stand up the next time they're looked down on. He nodded, understanding. Not everyone teaches with chalkboards. Some teach with healed scars. Olivia stepped out of the hall as sunlight flooded the courtyard. The bells rang across campus. She looked around, young faces, backpacks, eyes full of hope. The world still had a chance to be kind if it remembered today. She stopped by the Wall of Honor. Among the names of scholars and pioneers, there was now a small bronze plaque. Olivia Carter, The Lesson of Dignity. She traced her fingers across the metal and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a beginning and an ending." As she walked toward the gate, a group of students caught up to her. One girl, voice trembling, asked, "Miss Carter, if one day we're humiliated like you were, what should we do?" Olivia turned, her eyes gentle but sharp. Look them in the eye and speak with the calm of someone who knows who they are. "And if they never change?" She smiled softly. "Then keep being kind. Because kindness is the one language every cruel person hears, even when they pretend not to." The students fell silent. A boy whispered, "Thank you for speaking from the heart." Olivia nodded. "No, thank you for listening with yours." She turned and walked toward the archway. Sunlight spilled across her shoulders, scattering gold along the path ahead. She carried nothing but a thin folder, the draft of her first lecture, its cover handwritten. Respect is the language of the soul. Far behind her, the sound of wind mingled with the ringing bells, the past whispering its farewell to the present. And in that moment, Olivia Carter smiled, the quiet smile of a woman who hadn't just won a single battle, but had taught the world how to listen with humanity. If you're still here, listening to this story, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Think back. When was the last time you saw someone treated without respect? We live in a world that celebrates power, but forgets to honor respect. Olivia didn't just win a wager that night. She reminded us that character is the one lesson no university can teach, but every human must learn. If you're a parent, teach your child that respect is not a reward. If you're a leader, remember that power only matters when it lifts others up. And if you're just an ordinary person in this busy world, your kindness alone can still make it shine a little brighter. This isn't just a story about a billionaire, a waitress, or an apology. It's a story about how we teach our children to see people with their hearts and treat one another as if dignity is still sacred. If you believe that, too, leave a comment with the words, "Respect first." It's your way of saying that humanity still matters. And if you'd like to see another true story about respect, watch The Next Journey. Jackson Cole, Respect by Default. It begins with a black card being declined, and ends with a lesson in culture and humanity. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because every week, there's a new story about compassion, fairness, and the ordinary people who teach the world how to be kind again.